In the wonderful world of hot rods and drag racing and, just automotive sport in general, things are never always clear cut. Power to weight ratio, right? You want as much power and as less weight as humanly possible to go as fast as possible, right? Well, that's not always clear cut, see. Sometimes having a lot of power and not a whole lot of weight will slow you down because you can't get the power on the road. That same logic applies inside the motor too. Not counting the valve train, you always want that light as possible, the valve train. But your rotating assembly, pistons, rods, crankshaft, harmonic balancer, damper, flex plate, flywheel, that kind of stuff. Sometimes not having it too light can actually make you go faster too. Newton's law is a tricky mistress, alright? Let me explain a few things. Let's start with the wheels and tires, right? Now, having light wheels and tires, obviously less rolling resistance, easier for the motor to spin them, right? Easier for everything to start moving. The less mass you have, the less force you need to make it move. But that really only helps if you don't have enough power to get these things up and going. If you have the power, you have the torque, having too light of wheels, they'll never hook up because you can spin them really easily, right? You have a high horsepower motor, high torque motor, putting out a lot of power right off the hit. Having big, heavy rear wheels can actually dampen that initial shock that the motor puts out to keep it from breaking traction. And that same logic applies further down track too. If you have a really nice built transmission, very crisp shifts, hard shifts, violent shifts, right? And you're, 1-2 shifting, oftentimes you got a lot of power, you can actually break traction during your 1-2 shift down track. Well, big heavy wheels are going to be less affected by those hard shifts because, again, it's a big damper. It will dampen the actual shock applied to, the drivetrain here. And if you do break traction, pedaling with these big, heavy wheels, you can actually feather the throttle to get her back a lot easier. Now, if you could hold traction with lighter wheels, obviously you'll go faster. But what good is that power if you can't use it, right? I'd rather be able to put the power to the ground than have ultimate power that I can never achieve. Now, this only applies to the drive wheels, the ones that are actually propelling the car. Your front runner's still necessary, You don't want any more weight up front. Can I help you with something?
No.
Oh, okay.
I just want to be in the video.
Well, you're in it now. Now let's move on to the rotating assembly part. Oh, I don't have one, but pretend I do, right? Now, having a light rotating assembly allows the engine to, obviously rev up faster because there's less for it to, reciprocate. Makes a lot of sense. Why would you ever want that heavier? Rare cases. Now, let's say you got a heavy car, 3,500 pounds, 4,000 pounds. It's got a manual, but it's got small cubic inches. It doesn't have a whole lot of grunt. And you want to get this thing motoring down the track. Well, if you're standing there at the starting line, you got her revved up, right? And you dump that clutch and you try to get it going. A light rotating assembly doesn't have the momentum, the spinning flywheel effect to really hit that heavy mass and get it going. This will slow down considerably. Won't have a lot of oomph. You have a heavy rotating assembly. It's already spinning, mind you. You already got this thing up and rotating. You don't have to rotate it any further off the starting line, right? It's already there. Heavy rotating assembly will have the inertia, the flywheel effect, the mass to really hit that heavy car and get it going off the starting line. Now, again, if you got a stripped down car, lightweight, you got sizable horsepower, you want your rotating assembly super light so it'll rev really nicely. In perfect world, that's the way you want it. But if you have a mismatch like that, which a lot of people do, right? They got a heavy car, you got small cubic inches, maybe they're running some class, having that flywheel effect can really get it up off the line and going. You got super high horsepower, right? You got 1,000 horsepower LS turbo, and you got it in something that weighs, as much as her, right? You're never going to get that power down to the ground. If you got no weight transfer, no, nothing that's going to plant it, what good's having it? It's useless at that point. You're just going to be burning rubber all the time, which is nice, but if you're sitting there burning rubber while this Prius is passing your ass, it's not a good look. I mean, for example, I would ditch all the weight from about here down, get rid of it. Here up, I'd keep that for weight transfer, depending on your chassis setup and what you got going on. But just an average factory setup, leaf spring rear end, that's the way I'd play it. So ultimately, your power to weight ratio, your light rotating assembly, and all that, you want it as light as possible with as much horsepower and torque as possible in a perfect world. If you were mechanically connected to the ground, that's the way you'd play it. But in the real world, we're not. We are limited by our capability of sticking the power to the ground. So sometimes you gotta, balance things a little more. Okay, well, I mean, that's it for this video. Hope you got something out of that, and I'll catch you next time. You like to interrupt my videos while I'm trying to make it. Do you know that? What, what was that over there by the tires, huh?